Hello learners, welcome to the class again. I'm your teacher Renuka Verma and this is the official YouTube channel of the Government College Sirohi, Department of English. So in the previous class we talked about the three members of the club, the Spectator Club by Richard Steele. So far we have read about Sir Roger de Coverley and the lawyer whom Steele has not given a name in the essay. And we have also talked about Sir Andrew Freeport, who was a skilled businessman. And now we're going to talk about Captain Sentry. Now, Steele he talks about his courageous intelligence, and he says that he had a good understanding of the ways of the world. He was such a man who had not received good consideration of his abilities. So he was very courageous and intelligent person, but he was not recognized by the society. His abilities were not recognized by the society. He had been captain in military for some years and fought bravely on fronts. He left the army because even though he rendered meritorious services which anyone could see and appreciate, promotion did not come to him. So he just left the army services because he was not promoted and his abilities were not considered there in the army. So he used to say that only that man could hold a position in military who gets over his false modesty. He was of the opinion that it is cowardice to stand back modestly. Similarly, a man who failed to assert himself and demand what was his due was a coward. So what he says is that if you are doing your service, you are not supposed to ask for the promotions and for the recognition. So he just left, and he says that a man who failed to assert himself and demand what was his due was a coward. So what he says that if a person does not flatter, is not involved in the flattery of the senior officers, and who does not demand anything and cannot assert himself in the army, is considered a coward. So he was very frank in speaking about the weaknesses of his officers. So he was not a person who used to butter the seniors for the promotion. So this frankness was a part of his character. Though he commanded many persons in military, he was never haughty. So he was never proud. He never became a flatterer, although he obeyed his seniors and officers. So because he was not a flatterer and he was a very modest and a very intelligent and courageous person, he did not like the services, the consideration which was given by the army to him, and that is why he resigned from the army. So we have read about Captain Sentry also. Then he talks about the most happy-go-lucky and the most romantic person in the group, that is Will Honeycomb. So he talks about his qualities, that he was old. There were no traces of the passage of time in his brain or on his personal. So though he was very old, but he did not look brave and he did not think like an old person. So he did not look old neither, and no, his thoughts belong to his age. That means he was young by heart and his personality. He had an attractive personality and could impress women by his talk. So he was that kind of a talkative and womanizer kind of a person who could impress any woman by his personality, though he was very old. So he dressed well and was well acquainted with the history of every fashion that remained in vogue in England. So he was a very fashionable kind of a person who knew each and everything about the vogue and the fashion of England. Will Honeycomb was always interested in matters pertaining to women. So he was a womanizer. He was very interested in the matters of women. In his conventions, he talked mostly of women, their dresses, their manners and their fashions. So He was so earlier we have read about the lawyer, the judge, and uh, the businessman, okay, and then the captain also. Now we have a very different and very romantic kind of a character who is a happy-go-lucky kind of a person, who is very fashionable, and he always busy with the talks about the women. So he had every knowledge about the way a woman dresses, their manners and their fashions. So he had a good knowledge of their history also. He could tell that the hairstyle or hats or our wives and daughters resemble to those of the wenches of French kings. So he can also talk about the history of the fashion, that from where the present style or the present fashion arrived from. So, but the author says that he was a very good person, a gentleman, and if we leave aside the relations of women, he was a very honest and worthy man. So Will Honeycomb is also a gentleman, but the only disquality, demerit that he discusses is that he was too much interested in the matters of the women. Then at the end of the essay, the author tells us about one of his companions who seldom waited him. So that is a very inactive kind of a person, a member who very seldom visits the club. So he was not very regular kind of a member of the club. He was a philosopher and a clergyman. He lived a very sacred life. So because he was a philosopher and a clergyman, so he did not indulge in the meetings and gatherings of the club. So he lived a very sacred life. He was very weak in constitution. So he had a very weak body. Because of his ill health, he could not fulfill the responsibilities which promotion in the church might have brought him. So he even like Captain Sentry, he was also not promoted in the church because of his weak disposition. He spoke on divine topic with authority, and he wished for the good of the world even after his death. So he was a very philosophical and a moral bent of a character who lived a very sacred life, and who was not very, and who believed in the well-being of the world. And that is why, because of his weak disposition and his philosophical life and a very isolate kind of a life that he used to live, he could not attend the meetings of the club. So he was not a very active and regular member of the club. So we have read so far about all the 6 members of the Spectator Club. A Spectator Club was one of the most popular clubs of the 18th century, and we have read about Sir Roger de Coverley, the lawyer, Captain Sentry, Andrew Freeport, and the clergyman, and Will Honeycomb, the most popular and the most hearty and happy-go-lucky kind of a person. So, enough for today. Please go through the essay again. Thank you.